Hi there, it's Dr. Jones. Well, we're more than halfway through, so I hope you guys are feeling good about that and about the course. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time today talking a little bit about musical elements to help you get ready for the big paper. I know some of you struggled in the last one, so a couple things to talk to you about. One of them is when I speak about musical elements and making sure there's the ME or musical element discussion in your paper, that really is about you finding points in your song where lots of musical sounds come together to create an emotional response. It could be a high point in the song, it could be some part of the bridge or one of the verses that's particularly poignant. And one of the ways to go about really doing in-depth listening is to listen to your song several times with kinds of different points of focus. One idea would be to go through and make a chart, a timeline, maybe put verse, verse, refrain, which is the formula of most songs. There might be an instrumental solo in there somewhere. And then each time you listen to the song, listen to one voice of the song. In other words, maybe just the singer, maybe the background singers you'd listen one time, just listening to their role, if there are some. Listening to the guitar, what it does during the course of the song, the bass, the drums, etc. And just kind of marking points where they're, wow, this is a great spot in the end of the first verse where the singer sings really high, the guitar does this, the bass does this. There's lots of ways that music emphasizes things to us. Sometimes silence is a big emphasis. Maybe all the instruments drop out and the singer is suddenly singing alone. Or maybe a bunch of instruments come in and create a bigger texture. One of the things that's been happening since you were very young is you've been indoctrinated by musicians to associate certain musical sounds with emotions. You may not believe me, but it's been going on your whole lives. As you watched cartoons or played video games or went to the movies or watched television or shopped in the mall, you're surrounded by music. Musicians, guys like me, we understand what kinds of music urges you to do different things. To make you drive your car faster, to make you want to dance on the table at that frat party, to make you buy something when you're shopping in the mall, to make you want to take your clothes off when you're on a date. All these things are things that musicians know and practice in their art. Let's take a small experiment. I want you to close your eyes. I'm going to play you an instrumental piece, and I want you, while you're sitting there with your eyes closed, listening to it, to allow yourself to imagine any kind of environment, scene. Maybe it's a movie scene or action in your mind. Let your imagination create it. And when you're done, I want you to think about what emotion you felt from all of this. So, here we go. Okay, that's from a movie. I don't know if you know what movie it's from or if you can see my little screen here, but several things happened in that example. First thing you heard, these low strings playing this repeated figure. And I'll go back to the beginning so you can hear that again. This is something we do when we create repetition like this in a rhythmic sense. We do this to create anticipation. So as soon as you heard that, you probably felt like, there's something more coming. Let's listen to that part again. So you can hear the cellos and basses playing this repeated thing, and you're like, okay, it creates tension because it's repeated a bunch. And whenever anything is repeated a bunch, it creates tension because you want change. You want something to happen. So tension, in this case, it creates anticipation because it's at the beginning. The little hits with the timpani that are going on in there also create this sense of drama, like something's coming, something important. Then the next thing we're going to hear the French horns. And French horns throughout their history have always been a symbol of the outdoors, of pastoral settings. So maybe the scene you're imagining in your mind while you listen to this was something outdoors. Here come the horns. Horns also throughout history not only symbolize the outdoors, but they symbolize riding horses outdoors, because horns were originally started as hunting horns to blare on while you hunted like a fox, for example. So maybe in the picture in your mind you saw horses, maybe people riding on horses. And the fact is, maybe you thought it was in a time period before now, maybe in the past. Guys riding on horses, and you would be exactly right. That's what the movie soundtrack writer wanted you to believe in this case. The last big instrument that comes in is my particular instrument, the trumpet. And the trumpet, throughout your life, has symbolized the hero. So you can imagine in this opening, people riding horses, maybe it starts far away, they're getting closer, and at the very important moment, the camera zooms in on the hero. In this case, the hero is Kevin Costner, and he's Robin Hood. And that's where the trumpets come in. Here come the trumpets. It's also the peak of a large crescendo. It got louder. And it's also the peak in range. The trumpet is the highest instrument. So this creates a big musical moment. So when the trumpets come in, that would be a great place to write about a high point in this music. And it creates this emotional response in you because you've been conditioned to do so. Perhaps if you had to put an emotional word to it, it might be anticipation to start with, but then it might quickly change to pride or strength or honor or something like that. Heroic, because that's who Robin Hood is, or at least that's who the people writing this music wanted you to think he was. Now, if we kind of swivel that around, not only have you been conditioned for instruments to give you certain emotional responses, even the sounds of notes in relationship to each other give you emotional responses. I'm going to pick up this camera. Sorry, it's going to be kind of weird. And I'm going to show you my piano. We talked about the hero, and the hero in music or in emotions is always, or usually, the fifth. Right there, those two notes together. If you think about Superman, that theme's written around that fifth, or Star Wars. And even Raiders of the Lost Ark is kind of a disguised fifth. There's the fifth. Now, oddly enough, if you, instead of that fifth, if you go up one more note and make it a sixth, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that symbolizes love. Or there was a great song called Love Story that was a sixth, this sixth. And we have all sorts of intervals, sevenths, minor sevenths, which are kind of a yearning thing. And as before we mentioned, the major scale, which you hear a lot in classical music, generally makes you happy. The minor scale makes you more sad. And then the scale, the blues scale, has lowered notes that have a particular sound that's important for our rock music. The blues notes, so instead of this, has a minor sound. So, another thing that you'll sometimes see in music is, if we take the beginning of Jefferson Airplane, the song on our list from them, Go Ask Alice, you're going to find this, it's also called White Rabbit. It's going to start off, oddly enough, with two intervals in parallel. So the bass sounds like this at the beginning. And that's going on along with the snare drum. And all that tends to make you think something is repeated, trance-like almost, trance-like. And you might think, well, maybe that has to do with the trance people are in, living in the dominant culture. Or maybe they think it's the trance of being on drugs. It kind of depends on how you see it. If we listen to a little bit of that, for example, you can hear this in action. So here's the beginning of White Rabbit, and you'll hear that. There's the second pair, about two notes with the snare drum. The guitar is much freer than the sound of the snare drum and the bass. So it's pretty much a complicated emotion. It's not one simple emotion. The snare drum, because of its history as a military instrument, tends to make us feel regimented, especially when it's playing a rhythm that's repeated like that. Many of our songs have this, for instance, the Ballad of the Green Berets. You have that regimentation there, you have the trance-like bass, and then you have the guitar that's kind of free. And then, when Grace Slick starts singing, listen to it.
One pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all.
In this opening, when she's singing, she's almost singing to me trance-like. How would you describe that musically? Well, in her voice, there's no vibrato or motion in the voice. It's one pill makes you. Instead of, she's not going one pill. She's not singing with a lot of vibrato. She's singing with one nasally, solid color in her voice. It's almost as if you were speaking without any inflection. Like the guy on the Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you know, who's in the classroom teaching. Voodoo, anybody, voodoo. That's kind of how Grace Slick is singing. Now later on in the song, she changes. She adds vibrato, she sings higher, she sings with more emotion. Maybe that means she's been freed from the trance. Maybe if the trance was following all the rules of the dominant culture, doing everything you're told, getting married, not having sex till you're married, never doing drugs, always cutting your hair short, never wearing blue jeans, all those kinds of things the dominant culture expected you to. Maybe that's the trance. And maybe you get together with your buddies and do some drugs and get turned on. Maybe you see the world differently. That was certainly what the message of the counterculture was largely. And you can hear it in this music. So when you describe the musical moments in your songs, several things come together musically that you want to describe using musical element terms, like the sound of the rhythm of the piece. Duple meter, the rhythm has lots of notes in a beat, lots of subdivisions, which makes you feel more active. Is it repeated a lot? Those are important things for rhythm. The type of melody, does it rise or fall? Are the notes really long? Are there lots of different notes? Do they sing what's called a melisma, where they sing one word over lots of notes? This adds intensity to whatever that word is, would be an important thing to write about. So guitar, man, the guitar really, the sound of the electric guitar with feedback becomes the instrument of the counterculture. In the late 1960s, if you turned on the radio and you heard that guitar, you either felt like, yeah man, that's my music, or you felt like, yuck, that's that funky music that they're listening to now. This happens with all new musical styles. When rap came out, it was the same thing. Some people embraced it, some people did everything they could to stay away from it. But certainly the sound of the guitar as an instrument, as a solo instrument, represents the hero of the counterculture. And you can hear it in our songs, like the beginning of Satisfaction, for example. Or how about this solo at the beginning of 8 Miles High by the Byrds, where Roger McGuinn plays his guitar to sound like a sitar and goes crazy with the rhythm. It just makes you feel like he's not following any rules at all. Last little gesture, that little tremolo going between two notes like that, that definitely became a kind of a code word in music, or a code sound in music for an LSD trip. Jimi Hendrix uses it all the time, and it was like when you heard that in music, you know they were saying, hey man, we're hip, we're doing LSD. That's how you find your new reality. And so I'm not advocating drugs, but I will tell you that like 1 in 10 people tried LSD in the 60s. A lot of them used it often, and from all reports of LSD use, what it does is it changes your whole perception. Different, like your taste and vision merge together. Your brain is accessed in a way different manner than normal. It was developed by the Central Intelligence Agency, by the way, and became a pretty effective drug in getting you to do things you wouldn't do under normal circumstances. But this in music, and if you see some of the films from this time period, it wasn't just about people standing and singing. There are all these flowing, colorful displays on the screen, all meant to engage all of the senses, much in the same way that a rave would do that in the 90s and 2000s, and would be used along with ecstasy. In the 60s, we listened to this counterculture rock and did LSD and smoked dope. But this piece in particular has this sound of the driving bass and drum at the beginning, and then the guitar is totally not on the same page, almost like saying, hey man, I'm going to do my own thing. Then when the voices come in, oddly enough, they sing much reminiscent of a chant, something like maybe from another culture. And one of the things that the hippies of this time period were looking for was alternate ways to view the world, alternate philosophies and alternate ways of spirituality. They looked to Native Americans, for example, their views toward communal living, or the way they viewed sex, or the way they viewed property, were based more on alternate cultures. The Beatles, they went to India and found different ways to view the world from there. So in this time period, young people were really seeking out another path to follow, because they felt like, in a large result of the path they were on, the dominant culture, which for them was the war in Vietnam, the way we treated black people that resulted in the civil rights violence, our rampant consumerism, all of these things were turning them off, and they were looking for alternate ways to view the world and to live in it. So the music is really connected especially in this time period, is kind of unbelievably connected, especially to drug use, but also to a worldview. So when you're writing about your songs, spend some time listening to them, jot down, brainstorm all the musical things you hear. If you have trouble, you can ask another person in the class, or you're welcome to email or call me. But I hope that helps, and look forward to the writing that's coming up. Take care.